It was the Congress for the New Urbanism that proffered my name to you. My remarks today will be from the perspective of several hats, though, that I wear. First of all, as Lloyd said, coordinator of the Transportation Air Quality Programs at the Center for Neighborhood Technology, an organization that is in the city of Chicago, the third largest city, unfortunately, but we do have the second largest transit system. That experience, in part, is what led me to become a member of the Congress for the New Urbanism, my second hat. And my third, I offer it from the point of view as a committed urban resident, concerned about people having say in determining transportation choices and in having a healthy environment. I am aware that you have heard from many new urbanists in the past, so I won't try and repeat what I am sure they have shared with you about our organization's commitment to urban regions. Instead, I want to give you a perspective of how the principles of the new urbanism are manifested in the thriving metropolis where I live and work. The Center for Neighborhood Technology predates CNU, but many of our principles are incorporated in the CNU Charter. For over 22 years, CNT has been working at the cutting edge of sustainable development. We work at the intersection of healthy economies, sustainable environments, and empowered communities, approaches in concert with my own personal commitments. To quote from the preamble of the CNU Charter, CNU stands for the restoration of existing urban centers and towns within coherent metropolitan regions. And to state CNT's mission, which is to invent and implement new tools and methods to create livable urban communities for everyone. As we all know, since World War II, urban regions have experienced rapid and, in most cases, sprawling growth. Residents of these sprawling communities are looking for options, solutions to repair the fabric of what was once their American dream. The quality of life that they sought is marred by too many hours stuck in traffic, too many hours chauffeuring kids, and too many trips to access the needs for daily life. To quote the Charter again, the Congress for the New Urbanism views disinvestment in central cities, the spread of placeless sprawl, increasing separation by race and income, environmental deterioration, loss of agricultural lands and wilderness, and the erosion of society's built heritage as one interrelated community building challenge. You are as familiar as I am with the challenges of our metropolitan regions, but our metropolitan regions are filled with just as many, if not more, opportunities. Now, CNT's president, Scott Bernstein, has developed a theory that guides our work at CNT. His approach applies economic investment theories and principles to the analysis of a region's ability to provide the quality of life that their residents seek. Any good investment analysis includes taking account of the existing assets, a strategy which can be replicated when taking stock of urban communities. Assets have value, both tangible and intangible. Scott would argue that the assets of cities and regions have intrinsic value, but these assets are often overlooked, hidden in plain view. So if we can focus attention on these hidden and not so hidden assets and the value that they hold, we can then look at redevelopment options for urban communities from the advantage of resources available rather than resource deficits. It is a more advantageous beginning point and has led us at CNT to many creative solutions as we work to redevelop communities. Chicago is a good city to use to illustrate the efficacy of this approach. Local retail districts in distressed urban communities like Chicago commonly decline to the point that the community residents are grossly underserved relative to their purchasing power. By now, most of you have heard, and most of you are aware of Harvard professor Michael Porter's work that argues for the competitive advantage of the inner city. It is because of urban densities in these communities that Porter and his researchers were able to document that the poorest 17 zip codes in Chicago have a retail gap against consumer demand of at least $1.8 billion. Many years before Porter published his widely distributed work, Chicago's Shore Bank, now nationally renowned by the Clinton administration for its community development work, stayed in its inner city community because its managers intrinsically understood that there was a market there that needed servicing. More recently, they too have completed an analysis that reveals that their South Side inner city community has twice the buying power per square mile than Chicago's wealthiest, by income at least, suburban community of Kenilworth. To quote CNU again, infill development within existing urban areas conserves environmental resources, economic investment, and social fabric, while reclaiming marginal and abandoned areas. And if I can quote CNT's mission, the tangible assets of urban regions are considerably and typically not valued, and that undervaluing assets leads to poor public policy, including urban sprawl. Now, there are at least 10 tangible assets intrinsic to urban areas, at least that we believe are intrinsic to urban areas. They include urban purchasing power, which I've already mentioned, concentrated workforce, mass transit systems, accessibility, abandoned and underutilized land, underutilized infrastructure, in-place infrastructure with underused carrying capacity, assembled right-of-ways, efficient resource use, and surprising biodiversity and natural capital. On the issue of concentrated workforce, the opportunity, of course, is to connect people and jobs. The options for doing so are obvious: to bring people to jobs or jobs to people. The former has been the preoccupation of decision makers, at least in our area. But let me quickly make the point that there is immense potential for replacement jobs in older central cities or in older suburban locations. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projected 50 million job openings nationally in the next 10 years. 35 million of those will be these replacement jobs. At CNT, we are pursuing strategies to use transportation infrastructure and existing facilities to create some of these replacement jobs. Getting people to jobs effectively and efficiently obviously depends upon the transportation systems that are available. For people who have been unemployed and have no personal transportation means, the mass transit system is crucial. Again, let me use the Chicago region as an example. Chicago used to be the second city, but the deconcentration of urban America affected us as well. By the beginning of the last decade, our density had dropped in the city from 16,000 to 12,000 people per square mile. But the majority of the people in the region still live in Chicago's county, Cook County. 5.5 million of the region's 7.5 million people live in those 800 miles of Cook County. Chicago's 2.8 million people live on just 221 square miles. The remaining 2 million people live in the surrounding counties' 2,400 square miles. So most of our residents live in areas with sufficient density to support mass transit. And indeed, our transit system does operate throughout the entire six-county region. But cutbacks occurred during the decades of the 80s. We were just as affected as other transit systems by the priorities that was given to funding roads. As funding was cut, maintenance was deferred. The system suffered. Service became less frequent. Rail cars and buses were band-aided beyond their useful life. And rider comfort, safety, and sense of well-being also deteriorated. As service declined, so did ridership. And the spiral was on. Less revenue, less riders, meant less service, and reduced service led to even fewer riders. And so it went. Ice-T, the National Transportation Bill, not the drink, was passed in 1991 and was indeed a new opportunity. Increased funding provided the opportunity to move once again towards a vital, efficient, and customer-oriented transit service that needs to be at the heart of any strategy for urban sustainability. Our work with the Chicago Transit Authority has included not only advocating for improved capital maintenance, but also for aggressive new marketing strategies. Hopefully, effective marketing would slow and maybe even stop the downward spiraling of ridership. This persistency led to the development of what is now the largest university and college transit pass program in the country, our UPass. We have 21 colleges and universities and over 40,000 students who have access to our transit system. The benefit for the agency, of course, has been what we had hoped for: significant increased ridership and new consumers with positive experiences using. Thankful to Portland's TriMet staff for assisting us in making our transit agencies aware of new approaches to provide responsive transit services. While transit has more recognition as a valuable community asset, the stations and stops do not. Our transit system has approximately 400 rail station stops and thousands of bus stops. I'm director of a family foundation in Chicago, and the foundation's funds came from the owners of a successful department store chain. An interesting factoid about how the owner chose locations for his stores was that he always sited his stores at the terminus of or at the intersection of rail or streetcar lines. We now call such transit area development TODs, or transit-oriented development. For William Wiebelfeld, it was just making a good business decision. Transit stops were the most logical places to site his stores so that his customers could have easy and convenient access to his places of business. After many years of inner-city abandonment and with the saturation of suburban markets, many franchise companies and other retailers are recognizing a market opportunity in inner-city communities. We seize the opportunity to marry this new awareness to the redevelopment around strong public transit stations. Retail amenities at these locations provide inner-city residents with the opportunities to shop locally as well as to bring non-resident consumers into their community. Concentrated development at transit stops were anticipated to have positive development spillover effects into the broader community. The program we created is called Connections for Community Ownership. It's a financial intermediary with a $2 million subordinated loan funds that we generated from banks and foundations. It links franchise companies interested in entering the inner city market with communities with transit-oriented development plans and minority entrepreneurs. The urban center city and its older traditional suburbs and satellite cities offer significant accessibility. Unfortunately, because the costs of transportation are not scored, there is significant undervaluation of the benefits of accessibility. We have been able to capture the benefit of reduced transportation costs through the creation of the location-efficient mortgage. Potential homeowners who live in compact urban communities can save money by using public transit as their mode of choice, rather than using a car. The LIM counts the benefits of access and increases the borrower's credit availability by $25,000 to $30,000 in our region. This has the effect of lowering the minimum income needed to purchase a home by $5,000. This product is now in the market in Chicago, Seattle, the San Francisco Bay Area, and Los Angeles. We have completed a feasibility study for Portland. We know what's required, that the required data is available to build a LIM model here, and we're just awaiting the go-ahead to produce a product for Portland. Our city, like many others, has vast tracts of abandoned and underutilized land, many of them brownfields, as a result of property demolition, abandoned shopping centers, abandoned industrial sites, and unneeded parking lots. Once again, we responded to the opportunity by taking an entrepreneurial approach. The challenges most often cited to reusing and redeveloping abandoned properties are the transaction costs for land assembly and information access. We developed a system that tracks property ownership and conditions, that increases public accountability and market awareness of potential property availability. We call our product the Neighborhood Early Warning System, or NEWS. Population losses in Chicago, like many other cities, have resulted in underutilized infrastructure. As all regions face new growth because of new household formations, in-migration, or urban disinvestment and out-migration, a relevant question to be asked is how much of the expected growth can be accommodated on land that is already sited with needed transportation and utility infrastructure. This is less of a problem in Oregon because of the urban growth boundary. The UGB is a positive asset that I wish we had as law in Illinois. Its predictability is to be envied. Parties interested in development know what the rules are and know what to expect. This investment, which caused the underutilization of in-place infrastructure, resulted in the creation of another hidden asset. The cost of hooking up a new dwelling unit in the city, older suburb, or satellite city can cost something less than $10,000 versus the approximately $60,000 to hook up a new home in a new subdivision in a former farm field. In this area, I suspect because of your rocky soil, it costs about twice as much to hook up than it does in Chicago. But you still have a considerable advantage over Illinois. You don't have to worry about building infrastructure to suit any developer's plan to build anywhere they have managed to acquire land. Most of the costs to our build anywhere uncontrolled system end up being included in the rate base of current utility customers. Most home seekers in our ex-urban communities are not aware of these economies. But somebody ends up paying, and it ends up costing us all. This creates an unfair burden on those who choose to live in efficient communities and amounts to a subsidy for those who want to sprawl. Enormous efficiencies in the delivery of goods and services and in economies of scale result from the grid patterns of our streets. These streets also carry the infrastructure for roads, transit, railroad lines, as well as utilities, including telecommunications and sewers. Already assembled rights-of-way represent both tangible and intangible assets. Intangible assets are such unvalued attributes as a sense of place or sense of community. The reason why a place just kind of grows on you, or you have an attachment to a place that you just can't clearly articulate. The compact nature of urban living makes the efficient use of resources easier, whether it's recycling of consumer waste or the exchange of industrial waste between firms in an eco-industrial park. The proximity of buyers and sellers gives our metropolitan areas the resources necessary to develop recycling industries. Many of our inner city communities, community-based organizations, have become urban, reclaiming resources for new uses and creating jobs on the way. In fact, created a recognition and funded off a standalone ongoing that can survive coalitions, organizations, and individuals. Illinois is agricultural, and like other agricultural regions, our areas may preserve remnant diversity. The Lake region and area is a good example. This region is home to both 37 endangered species and to 1/4 of the nation's steelmaking capacity, making the area with the greatest concentration of toxic sites in the region. The monoculture of agriculture has removed most complex habitats. So there you have our typology of urban tangible assets, the building blocks we think of urban redevelopment. Through the acknowledgement of these assets, recognition of their value, and appreciation of their potential, communities can be empowered and strategies can be developed which should capture the benefits and apply these resources to achieve community redevelopment and investment. To quote CNU again, CNU is committed to reestablishing the relationship between the art of building and the making of community through citizen-based participatory planning and design. CNT also believes that people are needed to take advantage of these resources, not just numbers of people, individuals, but organized cadres who are needed for action. These network of people do exist, but they too are another hidden asset. Urban areas are the locus of numerous interlocking networks that can and should be mobilized. A shortfall, though, in getting people mobilized is the antiquated ways that bureaucrats often use to engage community residents. In Chicago, we built partnerships and diverse, astereotypical coalitions to help us reinvent the transportation policymaking process. We have developed a best practice SWAT team with information resources so that they can give strategic guidance to neighborhoods, municipalities, and to the region. As we proselytize about these issues of sustainability, smart growth, and quality of life, we would use examples of solutions from places like here in Oregon, California, New Jersey, and Maryland. After a while, we were beginning to get the kind of ho-hum treatment. Well, Midwesterners don't believe that much of what happens on the coast are appropriate to them. Our response was to develop a handbook of homegrown examples of the best practices to get the skeptics more engaged and aware that things can be done differently. Careful though, once you get citizens involved, you must provide continuous feedback that lets them know how things are going, what's working, and what's not. An example of our engaging the public was in transit-oriented community planning. We work with community organizations to develop comprehensive plans for the areas within walking distance of their rapid transit station. We help the community identify goals and develop realistic plans to achieve them. Community planning groups who used our news system to track current information regarding a property's housing code violations, court cases, water arrears, tax delinquencies, fire records, or real estate sales were equipped with a new use for an old tool. We produced for them baseline land use maps for the targeted areas using the news data files. The community planning groups who created the Todd redevelopment plans for the West Garfield Park area have to be recognized for their impetus in having us create the Connections for Community Ownership program. West Garfield Park is a low-income Chicago West Side community with a total purchasing power of $2 billion a year within a 2-mile radius of its rail station. They wanted minority entrepreneurs to own and operate the businesses in their community. And it was a transient disinvestment cycle that led to this community planning group. The Chicago Transit Authority had proposed the demolition of the Lake Street line because of the years of deferred maintenance had, had taken its toll on the then 100-year-old elevated line. It took a concentrated coalition of inner-ring suburban mayors and inner-city community leaders to force the CTA into halting the demolition. Joint planning around the transit line stations and the transit-oriented development districts has enabled continued reinvestment at both the city and suburban stops for a variety of reasons. And trying to follow through on the community's wishes for minority entrepreneurs, we kept being challenged by the undercapitalization of otherwise skilled potential business owners. That's the reason our TIDE program, Connections for Community Ownership, includes the subordinated loan program. We were using the LIM program to support the community redevelopment plans by providing financial incentives to home buyers to purchase homes near those transit homes. One of our joint venture partners in the TIDE development is a CDC. They took on the responsibility to build and redevelop affordable rental and for sale housing units. A comprehensive approach to capturing hidden assets for community redevelopment and the development of transportation choice and transportation demand reduction provided other benefits. Since only 1 in 5 to 1 in 4 transportation trips are for journeys to work, the majority of the trips take us to school, shopping, recreation, and religious congregations. Infill development and the redevelopment of existing properties in locations where infrastructure already exists can further reduce transportation demand and decrease the need for expensive new infrastructure. These public savings generated by the avoided costs of new infrastructure need to be reinvested in the transit-served location efficient areas. And that's what we're about. The approaches of visioning and valuation, of seizing on opportunities and inventing creative responses have guided our work. I hope that my describing our strategies and providing a few examples have been instructive for you. We love to see the replication of our work, and we stand ready to assist. But before I close, I want to make sure that you have an invitation to come to the CNU's Congress that will be here in June 15th through 18th. It is a Congress that will be dealing with a lot of the issues that I just described because it's entitled The Politics of Place. That you can use a lot of design standards, you can try and do community building, but it all comes down to that sense of place and whether or not that place is working for you. So thank you again for the invitation and the opportunity to share our successes with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's an honor to have you as our guest here at City Club and to anticipate the CNU conference in June. A little bit of what you touched on reminds me of a whole milieu of energy and energy drain that occurs in Portland around community involvement, around stimulating citizens' participation, and like you said, be careful what you wish for. But one of the frustrations, obviously we want citizen input, we want that ownership of a project, whatever it is, a community center and a park, but we want that commitment, but it's always a struggle and always frustrating for us to engage minorities and to engage low-income people, especially in Portland, the middle-class whites, they're there and they'll stay there. But could you help us with some ideas on that? Thank you.
Certainly. Well, you know, middle-class whites we work with, but we work a lot with minority communities, and we work an awful lot with low-income communities of all races. You know, the one advantage we have, I guess, in Chicago over you in Portland is that we have a great diversity. If it exists in the world, it exists in Chicago. So we have lots of opportunities to react and relate to a lot of different cultures, ethnicity, religious traditions, and so forth. But Susan, to answer your question specifically, we never try and have one approach to dealing with community. As I said, we have a diversity, and so the first thing we do is that we get to know who we're talking to. We try and understand who the audience is. That what works for Christians does not work for Hindus. What works for the Jewish community doesn't always work for the Arab community. So, I mean, we start with who are we talking to, who are we dealing with. Once we understand that, then we do what's appropriate. For example, there is a difference between getting Hispanics to come out to solve problems in public. They much prefer to solve real problems face-to-face. In fact, they call it being in the ditch, which is something that comes out of the culture in Mexico. So, you know, that's one of the things. But just generally, if I can talk about not the kind of specifics, but just generally, what we try and do is to go to where people are, to go when people are available to be there, and to go responding to their own self-interest. You know, like you may want a daycare center, or you may want a park, or you may want a new transit system, but what is it that the community wants? So you start there, understand their self-interest, and then you translate what you want as a benefit to them achieving what it is they want. Now, we use that a lot with organizing in Chicago. For example, there is a proposal that we have been fighting now to build 2 toll road extensions. One down into Will County, which is the southern part of the region. It's still mostly agriculture. The other toll road would go into Lake County, which is an urban county, but it's called Lake County because it is full of lakes. So it's a sensitive environmental area. Neither community wanted the toll roads, but for very different reasons. Now, we're working on the west side of Chicago with poor people who are concerned about a transit line. The CTA said, no more transit line, we're tearing it down. And so how do we organize? Very different constituencies, very different communities. What we did was to tell people, let people on the west side understand that the reason there was no money to fix their line was because the money in the region was going to build new toll roads in farm fields where the farmers didn't want it. And the people up in Lake County who didn't want their road coming through and disturbing their sensitive areas, we shared with them what would happen if the money, excuse me, if the money continued to be diverted from the transit line on the west side, that it provided more money for the state DOT and the state tollway authority to build tollways in their area. And so we put together a coalition of Will County farmers, west side urban residents, and North Shore very affluent Lake County in one coalition to fight against tollways and for transit. So, I would say is that, what's your audience? What are they interested in? And marry those self-interests, yours with theirs.
And Nikki Lynch, member. I have a question. Is a city the size of Portland at all equated as far as economies of scale to something like Chicago as far as transit goes?
As far as transit, well, one of the things we're exploring now, the road transit debate on how monies get split up still goes in spite of ICE-T and T21. And transit still has to scrape for every single dollar to be successful. So what we're exploring right now is using one of the measures of T21, the TIFIA provisions, to jumpstart a new transit line that will actually serve part of our kind of like the welfare to work, dealing with job housing imbalance. I know if you've been to Chicago, you know about the northwest side of our region and places like Schaumburg and Woodfill Mall and all of those other places. Well, they have an awful lot of jobs there, but there are not very many people to fill them because most of the folks who live there come to downtown Chicago. I mean, we're crazy as a society. Tell me why we do things like that. But anyway, but there is a whole string of employers out there. Now, one of the other things that happened, and I didn't stress this very much, is that we always try and hook policy to decisions. Well, there was a policy change with the IRS that provided the transit benefit, that employers can now provide employees up to $65, and it will eventually go to $100 for transit passes. So what we want to do is, and we're working on it now, getting employers in this quarter to commit to providing transit passes for their employers. That will give us a base of money that we can use going to Wall Street, because TIFIA requires Wall Street support of the funding mechanism to essentially get bonds to build our transit system. Now, in Portland, there's no reason why you can't use a similar kind of economy of scale in the sense that you have concentrated employers. You have, because it's national policy, the ability to use transit passes, prepaid transit passes to guarantee bonding funds to create new transit stops, new transit lines, whether or not it's the intercity line or any other lines that services the region. You just have to put those together. And I think that works whether or not you're talking about a community the size of Portland or a community the size of Chicago. Because we're not talking about Chicago. We're really only talking about one little portion. And that portion of Chicago, or the Chicago region, is probably in area about the same as Portland. Just an example, but I can probably give you a lot more.
Jillian Detweiler, club member. You mentioned a couple tools that you're using around station areas that I think would have a stabilizing effect. The location-efficient mortgages, which help lower-income people buy homes, and then your connections program providing resources to minority entrepreneurs to start businesses as part of a transit-oriented development. What are the other tools that you're using to fight gentrification and to increase stabilization, and are these enough?
Oh, Jillian, I could go up to the first part of the question. Is it enough? Oh, wow. We're still struggling, so I don't know if I have the answer to is it enough. But yeah, we have, as I said, I mentioned some other things in there. Maybe I touched on them too fast. Sometimes I'm struck by what Mark Twain said. If I had more time, I could make it more condensed. I kept trying to squeeze a lot of stuff into a few minutes presentation. But yeah, I mean, we try and figure out ways to help create jobs all the time. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Right now, I didn't talk all about it, although I told you I was going to try and figure out how to do it. That's brownfields. One of the other public policy issues going on in Chicago right now is whether or not we need a third airport, a third major airport, and whether or not we need a second hub airport. And the proposal is, again, poor Will County. I mean, our poor farmers, people look down there and they see all this land, it says empty land, and our farmers go crazy when they say that. But anyway, we have this huge resource of farmland in Will County, and so there's a proposal to build a 23,000-acre airport down there. And the reason they want to build an airport, because they say that they need jobs. Well, there's no doubt that jobs are needed for the southern part of the region. O'Hare was an economic generator, and the northwest side of the region is overflowing with jobs, as I mentioned before. So we have started to work with the people in the southern part of the region to try and answer the economic development question, not to deal with a transportation solution to this economic development need. And it's an area that has lots of brownfields. And so, the first thing we did is kind of like the answer I gave you for community residents, is that we looked at what are the assets of the south part of the region. They have lots of abandoned land. A lot of it is brownfields. They have the history of that was the industrial heartland of the region. That's where the majority of steel mills were, where the auto-related manufacturing and so forth. But the people who ran the small shops, the metalworking shops, are still there. And it's still the thriving industry. Chicago developed because of its transportation, whether or not it was water or land or air. Transportation is really Chicago. And the intermodal facilities in the Chicago area are still there. I mean, we have the reputation of being the bottleneck in the rail freight movement in the country. And it is a industry that is fast expanding. And the other thing that, as an asset of that region, is because of the intermodal, the whole distribution of goods and services. And now with e-commerce, it's growing even more. And so we have put together a strategy group made up, including people from the south suburbs, to look at the assets they have. And we're working together on figuring out how we can take that and expand it into something that becomes the economic generator for the region, rather than trying to go to an airport. And as part of that, I mean, we do things like we write grants for people. So we've developed an EPA grant for the South region to get funding to do environmental assessment and cleanup. We are working with the municipalities down there on, on recruiting of industries to support the intermodal industry from warehousing and distribution and so forth. So, I guess in terms of tools, the other, I guess if I could describe it as a tool, is the ability to do the analysis and looking at those assets. I mean, those assets that I went through really are kind of the building block of what we do, and we kind of mix them and match them depending on what the circumstances are. And, the economic one, is a strong one. The ability to save or defer the cost by having to build new infrastructure. And we use that. Politicians are, most politicians are you and me. We have some skills, some things we know, some things we don't know. And a lot of times they don't understand that you can say something like, we want to build this airport. When the downstaters understood that it was going to take all the road money that was going to be coming to the state of Illinois for the next 10,000 years to just provide the infrastructure for this airport, all of a sudden they got a new awareness that, well, it's not just a Chicago area fight. It is an issue that concerns all of us. And so information is a powerful tool. Getting the facts, getting the data, and putting it in a way, in a form that people can understand, that, again, speaks to their self-interest. So we do a lot of that as well. I hope that's not too long of an answer.
B.J. Seymour, City Club member and native Chicagoan. Grew up in Rogers Park.
All right.
Some time ago, our mayor, Vera Katz, proposed as part of her ultimate vision for Portland that we would have the entire system free of charge, so anybody could ride transit anytime without having to pay. We already have it in the central downtown area. I'd welcome your comments on that idea.
No, I want to go get Mayor Katz's comments on how you fund something like that.
Well, she didn't tell us that.
Oh, yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's a wonderful thought, but, you know, you have the realities of life. You got to pay, or somebody has to pay, and so either the riders pay or, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't mind taking all the road money we had in Illinois and making free transit in Chicago, but, you know, I think that's a huge fight to make that happen. So, I don't know. I think it's wonderful, but the big question is who pays?
Ray Polani, a City Club member. Your charter here says that you favor communities that should be for the transit was the automobile. Now, of course, they were that way. I think they should be again, but for that we need more available and more usable transit, which, as you pointed before, needs more money. So funding really is the crucial element. Mm-hmm. And it's funding decisions that got us where we are, abandoning one for the other. So let me ask the question, does the Congress for New Urbanism favor transforming the Highway Trust Fund, the National Highway Trust Fund, and the state trust funds for highways into general transportation funds available to all modes based on what you get most for the least? Do you favor that?
Yes, we favor it. It is the law of the land. The Ice-T, in fact, did that. And when everybody was preoccupied looking to the east to the Persian War with Saddam Hussein, there was a thing going on in Congress, and that's the reauthorization of the highway bill. And one of the things that we were doing at the time was we formed another coalition. You know, I believe in these networks of people, but a coalition to fight for a transportation bill, not a highway bill. And in fact, we have that. The problem is, for a lot of regions, the decision making on those dollars. There is no reason why, as I said, you could take all the highway money and put it into transit, and so you could do what Mayor Katz wants to do, but you have to get the decision-making bodies to go along with it, and that's the rub. I mean, that really is the crux. And the coalition that we've organized in Chicago is to try and get our transportation decision-making people to understand that transit is as valid a mode as roads, and that you can't build your way out of congestion, which is what most highway departments want to do, is that you get congestion, let's build a new road, let's expand lanes, let's widen lanes and so forth, and that you need to have the alternative modes. So, yeah, we absolutely favor it, but we favor that other thing, too, is getting the decision makers to favor it.
The problem is in Oregon, we have a constitutional restriction mandate all of gasoline related automobiles.
Well, that's money. But federally, you can take, the money comes in transportation money, and federal dollars can be used for transit. So if you all just put it in highways and take federal money in the past, for these and transit, you can just get decision makers to you can change that constitution here in Oregon. You want some way, the other thing I do is I do, so, you know.
Bob Wheels, City Club member and former Illinois Central commuter.
All right. Well, I got more Illinoisans here.
Yeah.
That's great.
Can you, referring back to your comment on the IRS provisions for employers, what is the cost in Chicago for an employer to provide a passport for an employee? And what's the comparable cost, say, for the transit system to provide that ride?
Oh, wow. That's a good question, and I should know that. In terms of in terms of the employer, I mean, we look at it as a benefit. You know, the transit pass came along with the provision for parking cash out, so that employers and owners of property could provide the choice for their employees. Either you get a parking space, or you can take the essentially equivalent cost or a portion of that cost home in your paycheck with and get a transit pass. So, you know, for employers, we think it's a benefit, particularly if they're an employer that has lots of parking. So, we think they come out on the plus end. In terms of the cost of providing the ride, we do have a lot of subsidies for transit, and if I were quick to do my math, I could probably answer that question. But we have transit, we have a sales tax that provides part of the funding for our transit. A sales tax that's just in the Northeastern Illinois region, and the sales tax varies from Cook County to these outlying collar counties. So that's part of the source of the funds. We also get money out of our general revenue fund for transit, and then we have the federal funds of transit, and then of course we have the fare box, that the amount of money that people pay. So, let me answer that question. I'll send it back to you when I get home. I can't figure out all of those things off the top of my head, but we have subsidies for both. We have subsidies for the automobile, and we have subsidies for the train riders, and I would venture that in terms of the fare box of what people pay for transit versus what people pay to drive their cars, is that they're pretty comparable. But the subsidy for automobiles is much higher than the subsidy for transit. And I know I see GB down there. GB, do you know the answer to that question about the cost? No? Okay. All right. I won't put you on the spot. Okay.
Alan Paul at the Urban League of Portland and for the Coalition for Livable Future. Ms. Detweiler stole part of my question, so you'll forgive this sort of hastily concocted one. I think that the growth of cities, be it as they sprawl or the corrective measures that we're calling smart growth, is a, if not the key civil rights or environmental justice issue for the foreseeable future. I was at a conference in Austin about a year and a half ago and noted it was a smart growth conference, and it discussed the potential benefits of growth management, smart growth for low-income communities and communities of color. Yet I was struck by how few of those communities are actually engaged in that policy making. And I was wondering if you could speak yourself about what you think the risks attendant are to those communities in not participating in smart growth policy making, and any ideas you have or efforts you've seen for groups in various cities, grassroots organizations, what have you, to come together and try to access and influence this emerging national model.
Well, the impacts are numerous. Let me answer that by saying that, yes, people in inner cities, poor people, minority folks, need to be involved in this debate. But the realities are that people in those communities are dealing, and not just the people, but the organizations, the people that support folks, in Chicago, the folks who work, the organizations that work on the South Side, on the West Side, and so forth, are working to solve immediate problems. How to provide better housing, how to provide, safety and security, how to create, get rid of immediate toxic sources in communities and so forth. And, the challenge that we have all the time when you're talking about transportation is long range. It's not short. I mean, it's not here today and a solution tomorrow. So in order to affect transportation changes, you have to be there and understand it's going to be the long haul, not the short. And so the way we have approached it, because we understand that there's no way that I'm going to get, a community-based organization working on, right now, just CHA, the Chicago Housing Authority, is into essentially getting rid of all the high-rises and saying, okay, go somewhere, all you folks who live there. We're not going to build enough housing, replacement housing for all you folks living there. And there are people in communities that are trying to solve the problem. Where do these people go? So there's no way that I can, in good conscience, go there and say, come and help me organize against the Chicago Area Transportation Study, which is our MPO, about, a highway that's going to go in 2015. And they say, go take a flying leap, okay? So what we have done instead is that we try and make sure they understand the relationship between the decisions that are made in this body and how they affect their lives. And we do it historically. If right now we just went through our update for our long-range plan, and people came there and said, I'm from the South Side, and they said, look, 10 years ago you promised to expand and extend the red line. Where is it? Where's our red line extension? I mean, very direct stuff. And so we said, okay, we will help you with that fight. We will go down to CATS. We will deal with RTA. We will do all those kind of things. We just need you when it's important to say to them, where's our red line that you show up, okay? And so we do the heavy lifting for them. And the policymakers now understand that when we come, that we are speaking for those communities. So that, you know, I may show up there. There's a meeting going on right now. I have one staff person there in Chicago, but they know that they're there representing a lot of these inner city poor communities. So that it's not just C&T that's speaking, but C&T that's speaking for a much larger network of people. Uh-oh.
We got time.
Lloyd says.
We've got time for
no
one more
more.
question.
John Leeper, City Club member. I want to address my question towards air travel. Airports bring with them their own kind of pollution, noise pollution. I wonder if you in the Chicago area have formed any coalitions to address that subject, and if so, what, if anything did you develop in the way of strategies as to how to cope with noise pollution?
The lead for noise pollution has been the American Lung Association because it's not just noise, but it's also the resultant pollutants that come from kerosene burning and so forth. And I tell you, I get around the country and the world a lot, and I think about that every time I get on the airplane, about my contribution to polluting of my environment when I do that. But no, there is an effective coalition around the issues of noise and air pollution from airports. And the way it's been solved, actually, again, it's organized networks of people that, you know, the city of Chicago, and I think all airports, at least, well, there are sources of money. All airports get trust fund money for a variety of reasons. But in Chicago, we also have this passenger facility charge. And so the organizing against the noise ended up with the city of Chicago taking money and soundproofing homes, schools, businesses, churches, and so forth, so that the noise pollution, the noise effect has been reduced. The other thing is we have two hubs in Chicago, American and United Airlines, and it's also, you know, the organized network of people making it clear that they have to move faster towards the new stage jets that are quieter. So, you know, the thing is that airports and noise and airplanes are, you know, they're with us until we can figure out how to do something better. And so it's really, you know, where are the funds spent? I mean, we can spend, you know, these airport trust fund monies and the facility charges on expansion, or we can take it and deal with the quality of life for people. And so the organization